ॐ परतत्त्वे सदा लीनो रामकृष्णसमाज्ञया यो धर्मस्थापनरतो वीरेशं तं नमाम्यहम्. We are studying here Swami Vivekananda's Jnana Yoga, and we are in the chapter The Absolute and Manifestation. I found that last time some listeners found it difficult to catch the theme. So I would go back and revise some of the portions and let us see what happens. And the chapter started from telling us that the Absolute, as seen through the prism of time, space and causation, which is our mind, as seen through our mind, which consists of time, space and causation, the Absolute reality, Brahman, appears as this universe. That is the whole theme. And so, we cannot ask why the Absolute became the relative, because why comes only when there is cause and effect. And cause and effect is in our mind. Cause and effect cannot touch the Absolute. So this question is wrong, and so it cannot be answered. And then the next theme taken was that knowledge is objectification. Our present knowledge is objectification. Whatever we know, we become the subject, and we have to make that an object, then only we can know. Now, how can we know our own reality as the object? So it cannot be known. But is it unknown in the sense that there are certain things unknown? No. Swamiji says it is more than known. And this is what is taught in the Kenopanishad. That is, let us see how I know a thing. My eyes are open, I can see you people. But seeing is not knowing. I know that I am seeing you. Please, this is the whole Vedanta. Please be a little peaceful, restful and attentive. You feel like that. I see, when my eyes are open I see, but I know that I see. If I close my eyes I do not see, but I know that I do not see. This knowledge is the Absolute. From this knowledge, I see the wall, I see you. In this there are three factors, I, you and seeing. We can change all the three, we can remove all the three. I see you, you see me, I see this wall, you see this wall. I listen to the music, you listen to the music. So, seeing can be changed to listening, but I know that I am listening. You know that you are listening. And then I can be changed. Listening, that is a mode of knowing. That can be changed, and the object also can be changed. So, still the knowledge remains. And this knowledge has no touch of I or you. And that is Brahman. Now, my knowledge today is I catch a reflection of that Brahman, and that becomes my consciousness. And then only this subject-object perception comes into view. One reality, one consciousness, one bliss you may add, when it falls upon my mind in the time, space and causation, it creates a wave. And one end of the wave is I, and the other end of the wave is some object. Either within my mind there is happiness, misery that I perceive, or through my mind, through some sense organ, this goes outside and touches an object, then I perceive. The Vedantic view of direct knowledge is very different from all the other views in the world. And once we can catch it, it appears so beautiful and sweet. I see, you see, these are only reflections, they are not real knowledge. Knowledge means Brahman. existence, consciousness, bliss is Brahman. That reflects upon my mind. My mind can be described in 2-3 ways. One is this time, space and causation, because of which the thought arises in my mind, what is the cause. The other way to describe this mind is that it makes the one light into a bipolarized perception. That is what my mind does. It creates a subject, it creates an object. We can understand this better if we can bring to our mind our dream experience. In our dream, now I was eating a mango in our dream, my dream. Now when I remember, I said that mango was imaginary. And what about that I which was eating the mango? Was it not imaginary? Was it not equally imaginary? Because I was sleeping on the cart. So my mind created two things, mango and the eater. And with mango, my relation became subject and object. And with that person who was eating the mango, my relation became the subject. I feel that. How? You can't ask. That is the property of the mind. It not only bifurcates the reality into two, but one of the parts it associates as the subject, I. I was equally imaginary. I was equally imagined by my mind. But with that I which was eating the mango, in my dream, I have associated as I. And with the mango, an object to be eaten. This is the property of the mind. And so, this is what happens, that Brahman reflects upon my mind, it gets bifurcated, and knowledge is objectification. How can I objectify my own reality is the question. But without that reality, could I have seen? Could I have any knowledge? My knowledge is a reflection of consciousness which is Brahman only. Remember, we are studying Jnana Yoga, and I defined it on the first day, that my consciousness which today appears as my consciousness has to be replaced by one without a second consciousness. That is Jnana Yoga. Jnana Yoga means, Jnana, my today's consciousness is that I. And this is wrong, this is false. We have seen that. I am the body changes, I am the mind changes, I consciousness changes, and I consciousness shifts, sometimes body, mind and all that. So this is entirely wrong. And the Rishi's consciousness is that one reality appearing as many. So when my consciousness is changed into that real consciousness, that is Jnana Yoga. So that real consciousness, we have to think everything from Brahman, then we understand things. So here in the figure, Swamiji has shown Brahman, time, space and causation, which is my mind, and then the universe. So when it falls on my mind, it gets bifurcated. One end of the wave is I, the other end of the wave is an object, and through whatever organ it has gone, then I see, I feel, I touch, even in the mind I imagine, all these things happen. So this is knowledge. Now, so how can we say Brahman is unknown? Brahman is the reality. It is because of Brahman that I know. So I have to go back to, we are doing that every day without our knowledge. I go back to the consciousness, and that consciousness is felt as I, and that consciousness is felt as an object. So that is, I think now it has become very clear that how knowledge is objectification, and how Brahman cannot be made an object, and how Brahman is more than known. More than known, because Brahman is the source of my knowledge, and I know Brahman well, not in the sense of an object, but I experience Brahman as my reality, and then only I know things. So that is the theme which Swamiji brought us to. And then the other theme was one peculiar attribute we find in time, space and causation is that they cannot exist separate from other things. That means you appear before me. Time, space and causation in the abstract sense can never appear. What is time? Succession of events. What is space? If I try to see object, I see it in space. Other than that, what is space? So space, time and causation are shadows hovering around the objects. If there are no changes, how there is a causation? So causation, there are events happening, and this causation is a shadow like hovering around them, and it connects in my mind as precedence and succedence, cause and effect. So time, space and causation have no independent existence even as much as things exist in the world. Things exist in the world because Brahman is at the back, and that much objective reality also time, space and causation do not have. They are the shadows hovering around them. This is called Maya. This is called Maya. Maya has no separate existence. Maya is known. Karyanumeya sudhi eva Maya. We see objects without them being there. This is the effect. From this we have to make an inference that it is Maya Shakti which is making us do this. So we understood how time, space and causation are like shadows. Then we come to this. The whole of the universe, therefore, is at wear a particular form. The absolute is that ocean, while you and I and suns and stars and everything else are various waves at that ocean. So, infinite is the reality, and we are different appearances in that reality. And what makes the waves different? Only the form. And that form is time, space and causation, all entirely dependent on the wave. If the wave is not there, form is not there. If the wave is not there, time, space and causation vanish. So, interdependence of appearance, the principle of appearance through time, space and causation, and the universe which appear, they depend upon each other. They are not absolute existence. Then, what is the nature of the struggle? My real nature is the absolute. And today, my nature is what I call Prakriti. Inside, outside, everywhere. And my real nature wants to express. And the Prakriti suppresses. So, I have to change myself to conquer the Prakriti. That is the struggle of life. My consciousness about myself should change. Any change we do in the outside world is not going to give me freedom. The only way is that I make the subject stronger. For example, Swamiji has given in the Darwin's evolution, the fish is attacked by bigger fishes, the fish grows wings and changes. So that change is going on till I will change myself. My consciousness will be changed from an individual to the universal, and then only I will realize my real nature. So the change is in the subject. Subject has to become stronger till it becomes Brahman. And then only the freedom will come. That is the Jnana Yoga. Here is another thing to learn. How do you know that nature is finite? So what is nature? Brahman appearing through my mind. So appearing through limitation. Brahman appearing through limitation is nature, so it is finite. Because it appears through limitation, it is definitely finite. This is therefore the process by which to achieve that conquest through the subjective, by perfecting the subjective, perfecting, becoming Brahman. I may make bold to say that the only religion, I am reading the last para which we read on the last time, I may make bold to say that the only religion which agrees with and even goes a little further than modern researches, both on physical and moral lines, is the Advaita. Unless there is only one reality, nothing is explained. And if there is one reality appearing as many, everything is explained. So the modern researches are tending towards oneness. Both moral, psychological, physical, all the sciences are tending towards oneness. Here it will be interesting to know that the top-class scientists of Swamiji's time used to attend his lectures and used to say, we are getting such a direction in our work because we have understood now that we have to proceed towards unity. So, that is why Swamiji says, both on physical and moral lines is the Advaita. And that is why it appeals to modern scientists so much. They find that the old dualistic theories are not enough for them because there is no explanation there. You try any explanation through any dualistic theory, you will get stuck up somewhere. Do not satisfy their necessities. A man must have not only have faith, but intellectual faith too. That means he has to believe what he cannot see, but he should be finding it to be rational. Then only he can believe. That is the modern demand. Now in this latter part of the 19th century, such an idea is that religion coming from any other source than one's own hereditary religion must be false. So dogmatism also is growing in this age, that everything other than what my father taught me will be false. Shows that there is still weakness left. So whether science or religion or anything, we have not reached the reality. That is called the weakness left. And such ideas must be given up. I do not mean that such is the case in this country alone. Swamiji is telling, I am not talking only about the Christianity. Swamiji's all talks are universal because of this very truth. It is in every country and nowhere more than in my own, in India. This Advaita was never allowed to come to the people. At first some monks got hold of it and took it to the forest. And so it came to be called the forest philosophy. By the mercy of the Lord, the Buddha came and preached it to the masses. It is Swamiji's revolutionary talk. People do not understand that Buddha was the greatest Vedanti of his time. He might have rejected Vedas, but his realizations took him to the Advaita, and that was exactly the same as told in Vedanta. If you want this in practical form, some people ask Sri Ramakrishna, you have practiced all religions, why did you not practice Buddhism? And his reply was that I find no difference between Buddhism and the Neti Paksha of Vedanta. So, Vedanta and Buddhism, the results are identical. By the mercy of the Lord, the Buddha came and preached it to the masses. And the whole nation became Buddhist. Long after that, when theists and agnostics had destroyed the nation again, India is talking of. Theist means those who believe in a monotheism, Ekeshwarvad. They destroyed, Swamiji says, India. And agnostics on the other hand. We cannot know God. give up, give up, give up, enjoy the world. These two people, limited idea of Brahman and giving up Brahman, destroyed the nation. Again, it was found out that Advaita was the only way to save India from materialism. And this is referring to Shankaracharya. Later on he will tell the name directly. And Swamiji shows the highest regard for Shankaracharya that we cannot forget. So, up to this point where we continue this very thought now. I told you in the last time that this thought will be continued. So, thus has Advaita twice saved India from materialism. Otherwise, we believe in matter. We do not believe in the real consciousness. Our consciousness is only apparent. So, through agnosticism, you go back to matter, or through monotheism, we again become materialist because we believe the world to be real. So, thus has Advaita twice saved India from materialism. Before the Buddha came, materialism had spread to a fearful extent, and it was of a most hideous kind. Not like that of the present day, but of a far worse nature. I am a materialist in a certain sense, science people, because I believe that there is only one. That is what the materialist wants you to believe. Only he calls it matter and I call it God. So, science is trying to find one substance, one energy, he calls it matter. And I know that it is consciousness, so I call it God. But oneness is what everybody is searching for. The materialists admit that out of this matter, all hope and religion and everything have come. That is what Taittiriya Upanishad tells us. It calls matter as food. And from matter everybody is born, in matter everybody lives, and in matter everybody dies. And then the refinement comes that it cannot be matter. It cannot be finer matter called the Indriyas, it cannot be energy, which is another form of matter. It cannot be my mind, which is the subtle form of matter. In this way, Advaita came back. I say all these have come out of Brahman, from consciousness. But the materialism that prevailed before Buddha was that crude sort of materialism which taught, eat, drink and be merry, there is no God, soul or heaven. Religion is a concoction of wicked priests. You know that? Rinam kritva ghritam pivet. Bhasmi bhutasya dehasya punaragamanam kuta. Trayo vedasya kartaro bhanda dhurta nishachara. That was the materialism. In English, this is what Swamiji says. Eat, drink and be merry. There is no God, soul or heaven. Religion is a concoction of wicked priests. It taught the morality that so long as you live, you must try to live happily. That is the morality. Eat, though you have to borrow money for the food, rinam kritva ghritam pivet. And never mind about repaying it. That was the old materialism, and that kind of philosophy spread so much that even today it has got the name of popular philosophy. This Charvaka is called Lokayatika Darshan, Lokayatika, popular philosophy. Because those people who say we don't want to philosophize, they live with this philosophy. Their philosophy is that don't philosophize, don't go to religion, eat, drink and be merry, that is their philosophy. Buddha brought the Vedanta to light, gave it to the people and saved India. 1,000 years after his death, a similar state of things again prevailed. In Karma Yoga, Swamiji has told that the world is like the dog's curly tail, because it is seen through our mind only. And so again that thing gets disturbed. Again the materialism gains. The mobs, the masses, and Swamiji tell the process why it got corrupted. The mobs, the masses and various races had been converted to Buddhism. Naturally, the teachings of the Buddha became in time degenerated because the masses, that is the fact of life. Whatever you shout, it is a fact of life. That how can the masses or the majority conceive of consciousness? How can they conceive that we have to transcend this world? And so, when they adopt Buddhism, they made it degenerated. They adopted Buddhism in name and they degenerated it. Because most of the people were very ignorant. Buddhism taught no God, no ruler of the universe. So gradually the masses brought their gods and devils and hobgoblins out again. And a tremendous hodgepodge was made of Buddhism in India. So whatever we blame from Tantras or this or that is decadence of Buddhism. Again materialism came to the fore, taking the form of license with the higher classes and superstition with the lower. License means same, eat, drink and be merry in the name of religion. Instead of saying we don't want religion, in the name of religion do all sorts of enjoyments. And the lower classes only superstition, worship ghosts and pretas and bhutas. Then Shankaracharya arose and once more revivified the Vedanta philosophy. He made it a rationalistic philosophy. So, through reason he showed everything that the Upanishads, what they are talking, is not irrational, it is supra-rational, it satisfies reason in every way. And so his commentary appears to be intellectual or rational. He wants to show that the experience of the rishis, they are not against reason. Then Shankaracharya arose and once more revivified the Vedanta philosophy. He made it a rationalistic philosophy. In the Upanishads, the arguments are often very obscure because the previous people did not require reason. They were transcendent in nature. So if the Guru teaches, they learn. And the language was crude. But from that crude language, Shankar showed the reason. By Buddha, the moral side of his philosophy was laid stress upon. That means behave like that, behave like that. And by Shankaracharya, the intellectual side, that degenerates later on. Today, the so-called Shankarites, they think intellectualism is Vedanta, which is not true, please. Now, remember this sentence, laid stress upon. This is called emphasis. And let us remember here, the supremely wise Holy Mother Sarada Devi. She said in the olden days, the Mahapurushas emphasized some aspect of the reality. And so, other aspects became suppressed. They did not suppress, but they emphasized, and so the other items became suppressed. This time it has not happened so in Sri Ramakrishna. He has emphasized every aspect of realization of God, and so nothing got suppressed. He worked out, Shankaracharya, rationalized and placed before men the wonderful coherent system of Advaita. So this coherency, logical coherency, is the speciality of Shankaracharya. I remember here a funny incident, I will not tell the name. One monk is telling me, only for the sake of logical congruity, Shankar denies this big world. Twice he told this to me, perhaps to provoke me. I kept quiet. Only for the sake of logical congruity, Shankar denies this big world. What to tell him? In dream also such a big world is there. And it does not require Shankaracharya to deny it. When we wake up, we deny it. So, but he had to accept, the point is that he had to accept that Shankar's statements are logically comprehensive. And that is what Swamiji is referring. He emphasized this part. And so, the experiential part, the feeling part, the moral part became suppressed for some time. Something very remarkably bad had happened. In Amalner in Maharashtra, there is an Institute of Philosophy. And there was one, let me take the name, there is no harm, Professor Malkani was there. And in Nagpur, on Sri Ramakrishna's centenary, there was a big festival. And in lecture he said, Vedanta knows no morality. This is what Professor Malkani of the Institute of Culture, Institute of Philosophy in Amalner said. People became provoked. And my Guruji had to intervene and said, it does not mean, it means Vedanta transcends morality. When you realize Brahman, what morality do you require? Your life becomes morality. That is the real meaning. Not that it does not want morality. So, these misstatements came because of the emphasis on intellectualism by Shankaracharya and taken to the extreme by his disciples. What we know of Shankaracharya today, unfortunately, comes to us to Shankarites. And there this thing happens. I tell you, I appeal to you and I tell you, in my life, by the greatest fortune, I met such a Guru that we look at Shankaracharya through Thakur's eyes and we do not find any the slightest disharmony between Shankaracharya and Thakur. Our old Vedantis, Swami Jagadananda was the best Vedanti of our times. And he told that the only difference between Shankar and Thakur is in emphasis. Shankar lays emphasis on the transcendence of God. Thakur lays emphasis equally on the transcendence and an immanence. That means God is beyond, and that very beyond appears as this world. And this I showed you. Shankaracharya accepts this in Mandukya, Mantra 1 and 2. And also in the Vedanta Sar class I have told this. But the emphasis goes back to Nirguna Brahma. That is the whole problem. Mother has solved that problem for us. And Thakur has emphasized equally both. In Maharashtra, the Saint Gyaneshwar has emphasized immanence. Shankaracharya emphasizes transcendence. And Thakur emphasizes both. If we can understand this point of emphasis, all quarrels will vanish. And nonsensical things will not come. That Thakur's philosophy is different than Shankaracharya. And it is like Aurobindo. Aurobindo does not believe in Advaita absolutely. Aurobindo has criticized Sri Ramakrishna Mission, Swami Vivekananda, Holy Mother. And we have to follow Aurobindo to understand Thakur. Please, please, please do not go that wrong way. How can Advaita follow dualism, which Aurobindo represents? And this is eating some of the so-called brains of India and America. Materialism prevails in Europe today. You may pray for the salvation of the modern skeptics, but they do not yield. Skeptics, like agnostics. They want reason. The salvation of Europe depends on a rationalistic religion, and Advaita, the non-duality, the oneness, the idea of the impersonal God is the only religion that can have any hold on any intellectual people. It comes whenever religion seems to disappear and irreligion seems to prevail, and that is why it has taken ground in Europe and America through Swamiji. So, यदा यदा हि धर्मस्य ग्लानिर्भवति अभ्युत्थानम् अधर्मस्य तदा आत्मानं सृजाम्य. There is a great principle there. Dvaita and Vishishta Dvaita and so many offshoots of philosophy can be preached by men, human beings. If the Advaita gets glani, if the Advaita becomes weak, only God has to incarnate and preach that. And that is what Swamiji is showing here. I would say one thing more in connection with this philosophy. In the old Upanishads, we find sublime poetry. Their authors were poets. Plato says, inspiration comes to people through poetry, and it seems as if these ancient rishis, seers of truth, were raised above humanity to show these truths through poetry. Now there are poets and poets. The ordinary poets get some emotion aroused and he becomes a poet. And the ancient poets got their consciousness elevated and they became poets. Jnaneshwar has defined poetry. He says that poetry only is real which has a touch of the absolute. They never preached, nor philosophized, nor wrote. Music came out of their hearts. In Buddha we had the great universal heart and infinite patience, making religion practical and bringing it to everyone's door. In Shankaracharya, we saw a tremendous intellectual power throwing the scorching light of reason upon everything. We want today that bright sun of intellectuality joined with the head of Buddha, joined with the heart of Buddha, the wonderful infinite heart of love and mercy. This union will give us the highest philosophy. In another lecture, Swamiji has said, yes, this has been achieved in Sri Ramakrishna. Science and religion will meet and shake hands. Science wants rationalism, but it has to go beyond to realize God, and religion should not remain superstitious, it should become rational. Poetry and philosophy will become friends. This will be the religion of the future. Let me make a small announcement here. The regular announcement will follow on the Guru Purnima evening, 24th July, Saturday, at 6 p.m. Somebody is going to arrange a talk from me, and the title has been given Sarada Devi the Philosopher. The link and all things will follow in course of time. This will be the religion of the future, and if we can work it out, we may be sure that it will be for all times and peoples. Once the rationality and the heart and the morality is combined, it will be for all the time. And that is what Swamiji has preached, and that is what we call Ramakrishna Vivekananda Bhava. This is the one way that will prove acceptable to modern science, for it has almost come to it. When the scientific teacher asserts that all things are the manifestation of one force, does it not remind you of the God of whom you hear in the Upanishads? As the one fire entering into the universe expresses itself in various forms, even so, that one soul is expressing itself in every soul and yet is infinitely more besides. Do you not see whither science is tending? The Hindu nation proceeded through the study of the mind, through metaphysics and logic. The European nations start from external nature, and now they too are coming to the same results. We find that searching through the mind, we at last come to the oneness, that universal one, the internal soul of everything, the essence and reality of everything, the ever free, the ever blissful, the ever existing. Through the mind, we went further and further and found this reality which is beyond mind and which is universal. Through material science, we come to the same oneness. Science today is telling us that all things are but the manifestation of one energy, which is the sum total of everything which exists, and the trend of humanity is towards freedom and not towards bondage. Freedom becomes the automatic effect because we have no bondage. Bondage is due to time, space and causation. Why should men be moral? Because through morality is the path towards freedom and immorality leads to bondage. Immorality means selfishness, narrowness, and it leads to bondage. Morality means expansion and that leads to infinitude. Another peculiarity of the Advaita, now this is important. Swamiji's Advaita, as seen in Sri Ramakrishna, is comprehensive, all inclusive. As I was telling you, Shankar's Advaita comes to us through Shankarites. And in Shankarites we find tremendous narrowness. If the Dvaitis quarrel with each other, we can understand because that is nature of philosophy. But when the so-called Advaita Vedantis become fanatic, narrow, that what we say is true, others are not true, it is a shame. And so Swamiji says, another peculiarity of the Advaita system is that from its very start, it is non-destructive. Let us go up to Upanishad and we will see. Swamiji has shown, we are reading practical Vedanta. Everything that was useful in life was adopted. This is another glory, the boldness to preach. Do not disturb the faith of any, even of those who through ignorance have attached themselves to lower forms of worship. Gita, na buddhi vedam janayat ajnanam karma sanginam. Lower forms of worship, Swamiji says. That is what it says. Do not disturb, but help everyone to get higher and higher. Include all humanity. On one side, free thinkers, agnostics and scientists, they are included. On the other side, the lowest worshippers are included because they are growing. The philosophy preaches a God who is a sum total. If you seek a universal religion which can apply to everyone, that religion must not be composed of only the parts, but it must always be their sum total and include all degrees of religious development. So from any point we should be able to go up. Reason sometimes becomes destructive by telling us only that point. But Vedanta shows you that wherever you are from there, you have to approach finally Vedanta, Advaita. This idea is not clearly found in any other religious system. That is why Swamiji is harping upon this Advaita. They are all parts, equally struggling to attain to the whole. The existence of the part is only for this. So from the very first, Advaita had no antagonism with the various sects existing in India. This one must understand. And this is unfortunately not understood by so-called Shankarites. There are dualists existing today, and their number is by far the largest in India, because dualism naturally appeals to less educated minds. Educated means cultured, advanced. It is a very convenient, natural, common sense explanation of the universe. Though when we apply reason, we find it wanting. But with these dualists, Advaita has no quarrel. These are statements from the great Advaitist Gaudpada, Shankaracharya. Gaudpada says, we have no quarrel with any dualistic thought, because they are telling about the phenomenal world, and they think that reality also will be like that. We accept that the phenomenal world is like that, but we know that reality is different. So we have no quarrel with them. That is what he has stated. Shankara has also explained that nicely in the Mandukya Karikas. And this is what tallies with. The one thing is that God is outside the universe, somewhere in heaven, and the other, that he is his own soul, that it will be a blasphemy to call him anything more distant. The Christian idea that God sees behind 9 clouds, Vedanta accepts and tells that the 9 clouds are 9 layers of ignorance in our heart. Beyond 9 clouds means more inside. When we cross those 9 clouds of ignorance, we will get him. And we find the same. When we look at it, when we look at Christ from these eyes, we find there also. Swamiji has explained this. Father in heaven, Christ always talks. But he himself says that the kingdom of heaven is within you. So he is talking of the heart only. And that it will be a blasphemy to call him anything more distant. Any idea of separation would be terrible. He is the nearest of the near. Now there is another point here. The heart, so-called emotion, the intense feeling in the tranquil heart, that also is satisfied by Advaita. Advaita is not intellectualism. Nearest of the near is the dearest of the dear. That is the statement in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Can there be anything more dear? Impossible. Atmanam eva prem upasita, the Brihadaranyaka tells. That the only thing dear is your own real self. Because of that, other things appear to be dear. He is the nearest of the near. There is no word in any language to express this nearness except the word oneness. How much near? Oneness. With any other idea, the Advaitist is not satisfied, just as the dualist is shocked with the concept of the Advaita and thinks it blasphemous. At the same time, the Advaitist knows that these other ideas must be, and so has no quarrel with the dualist who is on the right road. Let me tell you, this dualism is said to be the lowest of the philosophy. It is much higher than the ordinary man. Ordinary man has no God. The dualist has a God, and he is the object of supreme love. So, that is much higher than the common man, and it leads higher and higher. These other ideas must be, and so has no quarrel with the dualist who is on the right road. This is called the right road. All these lines appear to be an echo of Gaudpada's Mandukya Karikas and Shankara's Bhashya upon them. From a standpoint, the dualist will have to see many, yes. It is a constitutional necessity of his standpoint, because he believes in the mind, so he has to see the duality. Let him have it. The Advaitist knows that whatever may be his theories, he is going to the same goal as he himself. That is important. This is all Sri Ramakrishna. There he differs entirely from the dualist who is forced by his point of view to believe that all differing views are wrong. That is what becomes the mind of the dualist. I believe this, others are wrong. Advaita says, you believe this, right for you. He believes that, right for him. But don't stop there. Go further. Sri Ramakrishna has told a story. A carpenter, woodcutter, was in the forest. He met a brahmachari. And he said, go further. So when he went further, he found the forest of sandalwood. For some days he was happy. Then he remembered that he told me to go further. When he went further, there were silver mines. When he went further, there were gold mines. When he further, there were jewels and jewels. So, go further is the watchword of Sri Ramakrishna Vivekananda. The dualists all the world over naturally believe in a personal God who is purely anthropomorphic. Anthropomorphic means as conceived by human brain. That is called anthropomorphic. As conceived by human brain, time, space and causation, all that is called the personal God. Who, like a great potentate in this world, is pleased with some and displeased with others. He is arbitrarily pleased with some people or races and showers blessings upon them. Naturally, the dualist comes to the conclusion that God has favorites and he hopes to be one of them. Sri Krishna tells, Samoham sarva bhuteshu name dveshyosti na priya. I am same to all, there is nobody whom I hate, nobody whom I specially love. Ye bhajanti tu mam bhaktya mahite teshu chapyam. Those who are devoted, they will experience me. That is the difference. Shankara explained there. It is not due to partiality of God, but it due to the quality of bhakti which enables one to experience God within himself. You will find that in almost every religion is the idea, we are the favorites of our God, and only by believing as we do can you be taken into favor with Him. This is what Christianity or the Islam and many sects in India believe and preach. Some dualists are so narrow as to insist that only the few that have been predestined to the favor of God can be saved. The rest may try ever so hard, but they cannot be accepted. I challenge you to show me one dualistic religion which has not more or less of this exclusiveness. And therefore, in the nature of things, dualistic religions are bound to fight and quarrel with each other, and this they have ever been doing. Again, these dualists win the popular favor by appealing to the vanity of the uneducated. Those who do not apply reason to them and their ahankar, so to appear to them, you come here, you will be saved, you will be favorite. They like to feel that they enjoy exclusive privileges. Bapre. Swamiji now shows the difference between the Advaitist and the real Advaita, I tell you. The dualist thinks you cannot be moral until you have a God with a rod in his hand, ready to punish you. The unthinking masses are generally dualists, and they poor fellows have been persecuted for thousands of years in every country, and their idea of salvation is therefore freedom from the fear of punishment. Swamiji, psychology is explaining how the dualism gets hold. I was asked by a clergyman in America, what? You have no devil in your religion? How can that be? But we find that the best and the greatest men that have been born in the world have worked with that high impersonal idea. He is showing Christ now. It is the man who said, I and my Father are one, whose power has descended into millions. For thousands of years it has worked for good. And we know that the same man, because he was a non-dualist, was merciful to others. To the masses who could not conceive of anything higher than a personal God, he said, pray to your Father in heaven. To others who could grasp a higher idea, he said, I am the vine, you are the branches. That is the part and whole idea of the Vishishtadvaita, Ramanuja theory. But to his disciples, to whom he revealed himself more fully, he proclaimed the highest truth, I and my Father are one. It was the great Buddha who never cared for the dualist gods and who has been called an atheist and materialist, who yet was ready to give up his body for a poor goat. That man set in motion the highest moral ideas any nation can have. Whenever there is a moral code, it is a ray of light from that man. Buddhism. We cannot force the great hearts of the world into narrow limits and keep them there, especially at this time in the history of humanity, when there is a degree of intellectual development, such as was never dreamed of even 100 years ago. So because rationality is growing, that duality is not being accepted. When a wave of scientific knowledge has arisen, which nobody, even 50 years ago, would have dreamt of, by trying to force people into narrow limits, you degrade them into animals and unthinking masses. You kill their moral life. What is now wanted is a combination of the greatest heart with the highest intellectuality, of infinite love with infinite knowledge. The Vedantis gives no other attribute to God except these three, that is, infinite existence, infinite knowledge and infinite bliss. This bliss itself is translated as love when we experience that. And he regards these three as one. Existence without knowledge and love cannot be. How we know there is existence? Knowledge is there and we love that. How can knowledge be there if it does not exist and love automatically comes? How can love be there unless existence and knowledge are there? So these three are three aspects of looking at the same reality. Existence without knowledge and love cannot be. Knowledge without love and love without knowledge cannot be. What we want is the harmony of existence, knowledge and bliss infinite. For that is our goal. We want harmony, not one-sided development. And it is possible to have the intellect of a Shankara with the heart of a Buddha. I hope we shall all struggle to attain to that blessed combination. So this is, I think nothing remained difficult today. We followed in the spirit of evolution and we could get it. So thanks to Swami Vivekananda, how nicely he has defined the comprehensive Vedanta, and there in emphasis there is difference. We do not emphasize one aspect only, and that is why everybody can find his way of growth through the Upanishads original. This is not Swamiji's original, mind you. In a lecture later on Swamiji will tell, I am not telling you anything new. What the Rishis have told, that I am telling you. So, in the Upanishads and different emphases were there, and in this modern age we find harmony. Om Paratatve Sadalino Rama Krishna Samagyaya Yo Dharma Sthapana Rato वीरेशं तं नमाम्यहम्। ओम शांति शांति शांति। हरि ओम तत्सत्। श्री रामकृष्णार्पणमस्तु।